got a bidet.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are talking about the latest episode of Andor. This is episode 11, so the one right before the season finale. So uh, hopefully there's some good stuff in here for us all. We're going to talk about the episode itself, deep dive, tell you the spoilers, and then tell you our thoughts of the show. So I'll go ahead and talk about what happened. Um, we start the episode kind of in a way, the way we left off the previous one, where, Andor and one of his buddies from the prison got away. They swam from the base all the way over to, we'll call it the mainland, basically the closest thing that was to the prison. And they're hanging on a like rock cliff wall. They're very cautiously going up the wall just because there's Imperial people flying around. But we can tell that they're very weak as far as like the Andor's buddy says he can't climb anymore because his hands hurt so much. But they have to keep on going to make sure that they survive. So they're really struggling with the will to keep going. But
It's a
they do.
long swim.
Yeah, it was a very long swim. We do see eventually that they make it, up and above the wall. But before we get to that, we learn that Andor's mother dies. Well, not just me, but we had speculated in the past that we thought, something was going on because she had some things happening previously, like where she was refusing medicine and whatnot. So here she finally does actually die in the episode. Uh, we do see a handful of things with this. We see that her little droid is upset about it. One of the guys that's helped cleaning out the house is like, do you want to go see her? And he's like, no, I don't. And they, take her body out on probably like a Star Wars platform, so to speak, and she's covered up. And we learn that there's this like tradition of what Ferrix does when people die. It's called bricking. So kind of what this is you are cremated and then you are mixed with the materials for bricks, and then you are part of the new structures for building the different buildings there. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way of life that they have. Um, Another big thing going on with her dying is that there is an Imperial spy that's watching over her house. Uh, that's kind of like in the restaurant. I think it's a restaurant. I don't know what it is actually. Across the street from her house. Um, Maybe it's a mechanic shop because that's where the lady that's left behind is kind of wandering around. Vel's buddy, but he's sitting there watching over the house because with Andor's mother dying, they're hoping that Andor will come back and to pay his respects to his mother, and then if he does, then they'll have the Empire, come get him. Um, but yeah, that's kind of what's going on with Ferrix. Let's see some of the other stuff that's going on while Andor and his buddy, get over that cliff eventually. They do run into a couple of individuals. It's I think a new species. At least I hadn't seen this species before in Star Wars. They were aliens, so it was kind of cool to see them. But basically, two of them just kind of hanging out with their own settlement, and there was a quad jumper in the background. If you aren't familiar with what that is, that was in The Force Awakens. When Rey and Finn are running and they're trying to find a ship to get off the planet, and she's like, "We'll take that one," and then they blow it up, and then they take the Millennium Falcon. The one that they blew up is a quad jumper. So there's a kind of a connection there between this show and the sequel trilogy. But they see the quad jumper and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna, get in that so we can get off the planet." And they set off a little bit of a trap. There's this little thing that it goes beep beep, and then it shoots out like this really nasty gooey webbing. It looks like a big spider, like the spider from Lord of the Rings, just webbed them all up, and they can't get out of it. They're not strong enough. And the two aliens are just kind of like debating. They can see that they're in these prisoner outfits, and they're like, we can get some money for these guys if we turn them in, but ultimately they have kind of a change of thought or change of heart, and they decide to just let them go. And so Andor asks them for some help uh, to get to the planet Niamos, which is the planet he was on before he, went to this prison. Actually, that's the one where he was running in the streets and then was falsely accused by the Empire. So that's
Oh,
where,
to arrest.
yeah, that's where he's heading, him and his buddy, because he doesn't leave his buddy behind. But both of them are heading towards that planet. Let's see. Vel, kind of in the middle of this episode, Vel visits the antique shop and she's really aggressive with the shop assistant. She's trying to find out where Luthen is. She wants to contact him. She wants to get some things rolling. And what's interesting is that the assistant in the antique shop is basically like, no, we ain't doing any of that. I'm not telling you where he is. I'm not being involved with what you're doing. And she really tries to hush hush, their plans of the different rebellious things that they're doing. So Vel actually gets nowhere with the store assistant. We do see Vel later on in the episode with Mon Mothma, which pretty interesting development going on here. One, she tells Vel about, uh, her finances she feels is kind of in jeopardy a little bit, like she's being watched, so to speak. She's talking to her friend. I think he was in the previous episode where, she was like, I need your help, and he's the guy that kind of wanted his son and Mahma's daughter to, be introduced to one another. Uh, Mothma knows what he's trying to get at, with the two being married, but um, we had wondered if she was going to entertain the thought, and we kind of get an idea that she might be because she tells Vel that she may have a solution to their problems, and she's kind of like worried, almost like she's about to cry, kind of a look. Because so we know that she's probably thinking of it just because it's pulling on her emotions so much. In the meantime, we also see Mothma's daughter having kind of, it reminded me of like a Girl Scout gathering or maybe like a little church group. They're all sitting together talking. Uh,
I thought it was like a cult.
it might have been. I mean, that's religious, but uh, she had a gathering with a bunch of friends, and that's what's kind of going on while Vel and Mothma are talking to one another. We get to see Bix a little bit. She is looking pretty rough because she has been uh, tortured by the Empire quite a bit. She is very, very silent, though. I think she's actually silent the whole time that we see her. The Empire does take her out of the little room that she's been hanging out in and pulls up a hologram of an individual and asks her if she was the one that introduced the person from the hologram to Andor, and she stays silent. So I didn't know how to really interpret that, as in if she's, like losing her mind and she's not responsive, or if she's just hanging strong. I think she's hanging strong, but I know the Empire has some gruesome tactics, so I'm kind of a mixed bag on that one.
I think the Empire was trying to ask her if that was Luthen without knowing Luthen's name.
I don't know, maybe.
Is this the guy that you introduced to
Oh
Andor?
yeah, right, but it wasn't Luthen. It was
Right,
some other dude.
right.
Uh, so that's like a little bit that we get for Bix. We see Shrill for a little bit. He gets a pretty important scene. He's woken up in the middle of the night with a phone call, and it's one of his buddies that informs him that Andor's mother has passed away. And so now Shrill has the idea of, oh, Andor might come to this funeral. So we kind of have Cyril hoping Andor comes, and we have the Empire hoping that Andor comes. And so we kind of have this dynamic of where this show actually might be ending up is at this funeral and some crazy stuff happening. Uh, we do see that Cyril, takes some belongings with him. I think it was credits. And then he just kind of leaves is it his mother or his aunt? I think it's his mother.
Mom,
His
mom.
mom. Yeah, so he leaves his mom's house. Um, we do get a shot of Andor at Niamos, uh, tongue twister, Niamos, and he goes back to the hotel room that he was uh, attending with the woman. I think episode 4 or 5, one of the two. And his box of belongings is still in the room, and so he goes in there to take his stuff, and then he meanders out of the place. Uh, he is informed that his mother has passed. He does make contact with one of his buddies on Ferrix, and so he kind of has this, dilemma. He's not really talking about it because his buddy from the prison is there with him, and they're talking about kind of next moves and whatnot. But he doesn't actually tell him that his mother died. So uh, I think Andor is contemplating what to do next, but he's keeping it to himself. One last thing that was like really big with the episode, at least a certain character, is Luthen. Luthen actually has some pretty interesting stuff. So Luthen goes back to see Saw Gerrera, and it seems like Saw is like gun ho about what Luthen talked to him about before. He was like, "Yeah, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to do this," and basically Luthen is telling Saw Gerrera about Krieger, which is the dude that was discussing whether he wanted to get out of being a spy or not, because he was the dude that's like in the Imperial like round table discussion stuff. But he's been the spy for Luthen. He wanted to get out because he has a family and whatnot in the previous episode. And Saw wants him to be, taken care of. Uh, Whereas Luthen wants Krieger to be taken by the Empire. He's just like, let the Empire, feel like they've won, feel like they've taken care of the issue. They found their spy. But this really makes Saw uncomfortable. And by Luthen talking about the Empire and the ISB in certain ways, it makes Saw feel that Luthen, has people all over the place that he's watching different things. And it gets to the point where Saw Gerrera thinks that Luthen has spies even in his group. And he like questions Luthen. And I'm pretty sure Luthen was kidding, but he was like playing into Saw Gerrera's accusations. He's like, "Oh yeah, that guy." And then the guy's like, "No, no, 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 it wasn't. I'm not one of him." And so we get kind of that little interesting dynamic, but I think eventually they come to terms at gunpoint, actually, from Luthen. Uh, After he's done talking with Saw, Luthen is taking off with his ship and he's talking to his assistant at the antique shop, telling her about, what's been going on. And so he's getting ready to leave the planet, and there's an Imperial cruiser that comes up to him. Uh, and honestly, what this scene is probably the more Star Wars appropriate version of what happened in The Last Jedi. So what's going on is that Luthen wants to get away, and he's trying to charge up his thrusters so that he can. Just it's resemblant of when Poe was charging up his thrusters to charge at the First Order, and he's doing your mom jokes to General Hux, whereas Luthen's actually trying to impersonate somebody from Alderaan. He has like his little droid dude um, get some random codes that would be believable to the Empire that he is actually somebody from Alderaan doing such and such, and then he's just having like ship troubles or something along those lines. But the Empire thinks it's kind of weird because they're like, nah, we're gonna use our tractor beam, pull you in, and see what's going on. One of the dudes on the Imperial ship is kind of like, why should we? And then the guy in charge is like, we'll do it just for training purposes. Like he really doesn't care what is going on. He just wants to kind of assert dominance with the Empire. And while they're using the tractor beam, Luthen's ship is coming in a little bit, but then, he's got one of his thrusters still on and he's charging up to be able to use, the Mac Daddy of his engines. And it gets to the point where the Imperial dude is getting frustrated, and Luthen actually engages the engine that is, supposed to get him out of there. And that's what triggers the Empire to know that something's going on. And they actually release some TIE fighters to go after Luthen, and Luthen goes on the attack, which is pretty cool. He takes out a couple of the TIE fighters. And we get to see the thing that we saw in one of the trailers, which I've been waiting to see forever, is that Luthen has like these lightsaber looking things that come out of his ship, and he uses it to take out two TIE fighters. He like does a summer or
Flip.
a barrel roll and takes out the two TIE fighters. I did forget to mention the way he got away from the Empire is that he pushed a button and it launched a bunch of like shrapnel things towards the Empire and blew out one of their satellite dish things, and it let go of him. But other than that, that's about where we leave off for the episode. Did I miss anything pretty big, Sarah?
I don't think so. I think that pretty much wraps it up. That last scene was my favorite scene of the whole episode. It's the only scene with any action. So if you're waiting for some action, you might have to wait till the end of the episode because all the rest of it was just so much dialogue, which is fine sometimes, but like it was so hard to follow some of it between people's accents and then using all these names without a whole lot of background between people's names, planets' names. It's hard to keep track of everything because there's so much new in this show. Um, I felt like several times I didn't even really understand what was happening, and I almost kind of didn't care. Like it wasn't exciting enough for me to be like, wait, what was that? And that last scene was probably the savior of the episode. That if it wasn't for that, oh, it would have been a really not great episode. What did you think?
So I think I want to talk to one of your points before I get into my stuff. How you're talking about, they're throwing around names and it's really hard to recognize what's going on. I think it's funny. I feel the same way, but what I think is funny about it is, the guy that made this show, he's the guy that made Rogue One. And I still remember when I came out of the theater and I listened to even some talk shows, people were like, yeah, who was your favorite character? And everybody was like, I don't remember any of their names. And I think this show kind of has that going on with it as well, as kind of like a running problem. Like it's hard to remember their names. For one, some of the names are kind of hard uh in general. It's just like Srill. It's just that one for me is kind of hard. But I think the issue is just the dialogue and seeing the faces to connect things. It's really really tough. It's an interesting connection back to Rogue One simply because it's the same guy in charge. Maybe there's something going on with the writing, but
I
I
feel like
guess
with this show, there's so many different plot lines between Luthen, Mothma, you've got Bix, and then there's the people from the heist, those two girls. Then you've got now Andor's mom, the guy that he met at the prison. That, then you got the people from the Empire, Cyril and his group, um, Daedra and her group. That's a lot of different storylines to have going on all at the same time, where they like to do 2 minutes of each one per episode, but it's not two straight minutes. It's like 30 seconds here and then 30 seconds there. And there's never really a lot of substance all at once for any one of their storylines. It's like little bits and pieces, and I think that's why it's so hard for me to follow what's going on because then you got Saul Guerrera and what's going on with him. Like, there's just so much.
Well, I mean, to counter that a little bit, although I think it's probably done better, that's kind of the formula for Game of Thrones in a way. Like you see four or five different sections with the different families, and then, at some point they come together, but a lot of the times it's just a separate storyline. So I can
But you know what's
see,
different? Those are hour episodes and 5 minute clips, not 20-minute episodes and two
no,
minute clips.
mm-mm-mm. These are at least 40 every time. So I understand the idea of, it's very short in segments and they're not like pieced together. That I could agree with because, um, kind of like what you said, there's not a lot of substance where, uh, you know, we see these characters and then we can kind of internalize, who they are and what's happening. Whereas before or by the time they're done talking and you're on to the next thing, you're not really putting together what just happened a second ago. There's not enough room to breathe and process. Um, so yeah, I would agree with that with the episodes, but I guess just this episode in general, um, it was interesting, but at the same time, I feel like Andor's stuff really wasn't that interesting. I feel that we knew his mom was gonna die, so that wasn't surprising. Um, I guess the
Like they
comfort,
built it up to be a shock factor, but it really wasn't.
maybe. I We had the feeling that Mothma, maybe entertaining the thought of what's going on with her daughter, but I think this may have confirmed it a little bit more. Let's see. I think Luthen was the best part.
I
What?
just had an epiphany. Do you think Mothma's cousin or niece or whatever the blonde girl, what is her name?
No.
Do you think the lady that she met in the red cloak a few episodes back, do you remember who I'm referring to?
Hmm.
Do you think that's the shop owner's assistant at the antique store?
I don't know. I
Those two girls look very similar, and it just popped into my head that those might have been the same person
I
because
remember what she looks like.
Val talked to her in this episode, and then she talked to her previously, and so I feel like it makes sense that that's the same person. I think that's supposed to be the girl in the red cloak that you were hoping we'd see more of.
It could be. I'd have to reel it back and put it under further review. But I guess that's kind of another thing with this show too, is like I feel like when I'm going to save most of my stuff for next week because next week is the finale and we'll talk about our thoughts overall on the show. But I guess the last thing I'll say about, kind of what's going on, even with that, is that I feel like when I watch Kenobi, when I watch Boba, Bad Batch as well, I knew who the characters were. And in this show, I'm struggling. But let's see. Oh, I was talking about Luthen. Luthen's part I thought was pretty cool. I think the tension between him and Saw is more what I want to see out of this show. I feel like they conveyed drama a bit better than some of the others. Uh, I'm curious to see if they're going to show what Saw is supposed to do in the next episode or not. The thing that they're planning out. But the part where Luthen went up into space and then, dealt with the Empire, that was probably my favorite part, just like you, just because that was the thing that kind of pulled you in the most. I felt like Saw Gerrera and Luthen pulled me in just enough, and then that part happened, and then uh, it was a good way to end the episode, especially since it kind of felt like we're kind of going nowhere, but I guess we're going somewhere. That's how I felt, anyways. Um, so next week is the final episode, And I am very curious to see how this all pans out, simply because I think it's no question that Andor is going to come back. Because if he doesn't, all those buildups about is he going to come? Is he going to come? That's going to be for nothing. So I would find it safe to assume that Andor is going to come home to see his mom. It'd be interesting to see if he finds out about um, Bix and is able to try to like bail her out or something. Um, but I'm curious to see how the Empire and Cyril handles things because we've already seen, a scuffle in the streets of Ferrix in episode 3. What's going to happen with the finale and what's going to happen that separates the finale from the others? Because the finale is supposed to be the thing that makes you want to watch season 2. And right now, I don't want to watch season 2. So I need something, I need that little carrot to make me want more. What do you think is going to happen next week?
Maybe we will finally meet K2SO.
Maybe. I heard before the show came out, they interviewed the dude that is the voice of him, and I'm pretty sure he said K2 comes in season 2.
You're
Um,
kidding.
so maybe, but I have serious doubts. Um,
Can I just say for this episode, I think it's pretty weird that there were only two survivors from that prison break out of the like, was it 50 men per shift? There's a day shift and a night shift and like 8 floors or sections. So there's, you know, where's that? 100, like 800 people and 2 people made it out. I feel like that's pretty unrealistic.
well,
I could understand maybe like 20, that's still a very low number, but it's more than two. And they were saying at the end of the episode, or kind of the end, the one guy was asking Cassian, do you think anybody else made it out? Well, we saw on the cliff it was just the two guys. Why wouldn't there, whoever you would think that there'd only be like one way out is what they kept chanting in that
that was for the
episode.
prison.
Yeah, but like where did everybody else go? How did you not see them make it to the island?
They
At
could
a
have swam
minimum.
to another part of it.
Maybe, but this seems weird.
For one thing, the wall was really tall, and they were having a hard time getting up as it was. And, you know, uh, I think the reason why Andor specifically made it up to the top is that he had like the spirit and the willingness to do whatever it takes to get to the top. And if the other people don't and they, give in to their body telling them, no, I can't go further, and they're not telling it saying, yes, you can, they're going to fall off the cliff and die. So I could see with that being so tall that not very many would survive. But I think some of them probably went to other parts too. I don't think all whatever amount of them funneled into one spot because that would be kind of hard because if you're climbing and let's say the dude above you falls, well then the domino effect, everybody else is going to die. So I don't know. I feel like they just focused on those two for a reason. I don't really know which reason, but that's my guess.
Maybe we'll find out next week what this other guy has to do with Cassian.
Maybe we'll find out. Anything else you want to say about this episode?
No, I think that about wraps it up. I'm just hoping next week is extra action-packed.
Sorry to say that I'm kind of excited that next week is the last one. Um, I hope season 2 is better, but we'll talk more about that next week. We talked about episode 11 for Andor. This is, like I said, the one right before the season finale. So look forward to our video of the next episode coming out shortly after it actually comes out. It'll hopefully be out by Friday. And then we'll discuss both the episode and our thoughts about the show in general. So stay tuned for that. The way you can is by turning on your notifications. That way it lets you know when the video drops. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Drops a like if you like the video, and drops a comment letting us know your thoughts of the episode and your thoughts of the show so far. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.